Band needs a mandolin.
Yeah, we do.
All right, call me up, buddy. Thanks.
Don't all need to sit all the way in the back.
We're afraid.
Yeah, well, I took a shower at lunch. So it's okay. I can actually talk to the back of the room, but it's a little more
No,
illegal.
the acoustics in this room are terrible, I assure you.
Really? I can hear you quite fine. We will hopefully get one or more of our scribes in. Until then, I'll do a bit of a soft shoe. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Clean Energy Initiative or what we have going on here. But as I said, we have had a presence, the State Energy Office has had a presence on the Big Island since 1980. When I opened that office, we were working a lot with the independent power people. This county probably had more independent photovoltaic systems than any other county in the U.S. I know some that were cobbled together in the 70s, and it was a big focus in the early 80s, just working on the independent power with these pioneers who were doing stuff before all the balance of systems came in. We had a lot of wind turbines at that time, independent wind turbines, and the first wind farm of the state. There are still quite a few small hydros around, and you may or may not know that the first electricity generated on the Big Island was generated from hydro. So the Big Island does have some of all of the resources that we consider in our renewable energy portfolio. There's ocean thermal, of course. We've got the biomass because of our ag lands. We've got the geothermal, solar, wind, and hydro. I don't think any other county in the state can say they've got the full complement necessarily. So this island has always been a bit of a laboratory, if you would, for renewable energy, and we've got roughly 40% of our electricity on the Big Island from renewable resources. I can't say that we're necessarily going to stay in the lead because Kauai is really going gung-ho and has goals for that island, for that utility, for that county that are more aggressive than the statewide goals. Of course, they have a cooperative utility, so they've got a lot more flexibility than and can move very nimbly. And we're seeing evidence of that in some of the programs that they're going on. But we've got folks from Oahu High School, which is the closest one to my house. Both of my kids are Oahu grads, and so we're very pleased to have you. They're here to take notes with your questions. I may or may not be able to answer the questions. I may be able to give you a little insight. But as the governor said, if you have your question on a comment sheet, it will get answered. And all of these notes will be also going to the Gov's office, and they will have a record of what your concerns and questions are. Since we have a cozy group, that's the comment sheet.
Do you have any others? Already wrote that one.
These folks have what you need. Since it's a small enough group, I don't know, we can go by show of hands or however you want to organize your questions. Somebody wish to start out? You do, sir.
I have been interested in this. I'm a precinct officer in Mountain View. And the Hilo Coffee Mill has a solar array that was installed by one of the energy companies,
Okay.
which HELCO will not allow to open. And the original question is, why is HELCO holding that up? And the more general question is, can you explain what's taking so long to make this system to contribute to the grid possible for more people? I see solar panels going in on new houses, upscale houses all over the district.
Mhm.
Some of the businesses like Planet Hawaii have been able to get their solar array approved.
Mhm.
But, you know, for the general populace, for the lower income homes, all this stuff, it's just not happening yet at a rate that's, I mean, I know a lot of people that were off the grid did well until.
You're speaking specifically now of photovoltaics, not solar thermal, so that's.
Well, yeah, solar thermal, that's another issue, but the real issue that I'm asking about is why is HELCO balking on allowing these people to contribute to the grid and.
Okay, this is the Hilo Coffee Mill in Mountain View. Why is their photovoltaic system not moving forward?
And they have a large array, it's about.
Photovoltaic, just put PV. They have a large array. And
About the
that
size
might
of this
be,
room.
that might be part of the issue. I'm going to have to speculate, Mike, because I'm not familiar with that circuit or with what else is there. There are maps of the circuits on the HECO's website. They're called the locational value maps. In general, there's a industry accepted limit of how much renewables will fit on any substation circuit without detrimentally affecting the rest of the customers. And that's somewhere around 15%, although there is some flexibility. There are grid circuits which have higher penetration than that. But for the purpose of the locational value maps, there's a threshold around 15%, after which the utilities have to look at it very closely and generally ask the customer who's trying to put that on to do a study to confirm that that their system is not going to make the rest of the customers on the grid have lower quality power. This is a serious barrier, not only for Hilo Coffee, if that's the actual issue. And I'm speculating, because there are many potential photovoltaic customers that are looking to be net metered and haven't been able because other people got there first and have systems in up to the threshold in the circuit. A docket has been going for a number of years and just recently wrapped up in the PUC to look at reliability standards and to apply local knowledge and not just a rule of thumb from the industry on how to accept more intermittent renewables. We hear from solar companies who say, I get 6 people an hour walking into my office who want to put in PV, but the grid is already full in that circuit. And we know that this is obviously a chokehold. The PUC's been looking at it. I didn't serve on that reliability standards working group, but the reports and documents are in the PUC's document management system available online. We're very aware of this choke point. There are ways to address it. Just in general, the grid needs to join the 21st century.
Yeah.
And I think there will be a lot more happening as we get a smarter, more nimble grid, one that has ability to store intermittent electricity and mitigate some of the issues. I've got photovoltaics on my house, and I can see how the sun changes through the day and affects the output of my modules. That can be absorbed in the grid to a certain point, but when you get a whole lot of them doing that, it affects the other customers, and that's the main concern. So I agree with you. That is a big choke point. There are some technical solutions, and I hope that the PUC's report and their active work for the past few years will result in some fairly shortly.
I'm under the impression or the understanding that HELCO is requiring these studies, $20,000, $120,000 a pop. Why can HELCO do that? Why is HELCO not responsible to, to make the effort to make it possible, or to get national funding or something to speed up the process so that we can become more energy independent?
There have been a number of suggestions on whether the studies can be, say, grouped so that it's not every individual. All I can say is those are part of the portfolio of solutions that are being looked at. But
Would our comment be forwarded to the PUC? Would
you
have
can
to write
ask that
that
it could be.
Yeah,
I would write that down.
okay.
And we had a hand up, ma'am?
I just want to say, they've already answered that question, and the reason you can't get a permit to net meter and then your neighbor gets one too is because the power companies are arguing that once you've net metered, you've changed that engineering study, and now they have to do a new one for him to hook up. That's why. That's why. I mean, and it should be that they should be able to cover or study a whole neighborhood and figure out and project beyond the next household how that's going to
I
affect.
think there'll be some
And that's
changes
part
coming
of
down
the
line.
racket too on why our energy costs are so high is all these studies. Studies. They charge tens of thousands of dollars, he's right, for these
They're
studies.
expensive studies.
So it's more than a bottleneck.
Thank you for your added information. I'm going to skip over here and get to Chuck next.
Well, I kind of came in a little late, so I don't know. Is there anything going on at the state level to do something about, say, things like solar and grid level storage capacity? Or are we just going to let the power companies decide when to invest in that? Because it seems like they're using the poor existing infrastructure as an excuse to deny people going solar.
We've
And
got,
there are technologies out there that address that.
yeah, we've got some grid level storage demos starting. And there are a couple ways that can be approached. On this island, there was some money invested by the ARA, the Recovery Act, that provided 2 SAFT batteries over on the Kona side, each one on a highly penetrated solar circuit. One is by one of the bottling plants at Nelhan, one is at the West Hawaii Civic Center, and they are tuned slightly differently to do 2 different things. That's HELCO's first experience with a battery that's on their grid.
Well, that's kind of my question. Is it
Okay.
all being left to HELCO to do this?
No, it's also, we have other, I'm speaking specifically batteries, because that's about all we've got going in storage right now. But there are other projects that the Hawaii Natural Energy Institute, in company with the even Department of Defense and with some private entities, some of the wind farms, I'm sure you're aware, have battery storage. Photovoltaic array, the big one on Lanai, has battery storage.
So would
So-
NELA be a better resource for me to ask about what's being looked at?
It's not NELHA, it's HNEI.
Oh,
If you need a list of what all the different battery projects are, I can easily email that to you if you
okay,
could
because
give me your
I'm
contact.
I'm specifically interested in the liquid metal batteries that are being developed. I don't know if you're aware of that.
Yeah, well, I can name some of the companies that we have installations for, and there are technologies that haven't been selected yet for all of the sites.
I
As
say, I
I
don't
said,
think this is something that's been deployed commercially, but something's in development through MIT and shows incredible promise. And I'm just wondering, is the state looking at emerging technologies or?
It
Yeah, I'm
it really
trying to find out
depends
who
on
I
the
can talk to
program.
about what's going on and see where before we get
You
to-
might do best to talk to the university, and I can put you in touch with Larry Cutshaw. But it really depends on the application. I think you can understand how the utility would be interested in something commercial off the shelf, whereas the university and perhaps Department of Defense might be more interested in cutting edge. So, and
Okay, so I'll get with you, just those names, so I know who's.
sure, be happy to do that, Ken. And Chuck, you had your hand up next.
Actually, addressed within the material we're prepared for this evening. And that has to do with, what's the department's position on supporting or encouraging or facilitating direct power generation by independent and private power producers for direct sale to customers without going through the HELCO grid? When it's not just self-use or parasitic use within a single facility. There's actually a specific reason for my asking, because we have the potential now to do that up to 4 megawatts right at Hilo Harbor, and we have customers who want to be direct purchasers, and we can generate electricity for 25 to 30% less using entirely biofuels than HELCO can deliver. So what's the department's present position on that and the future of that?
The closest that we've gotten to a solution to having electricity generated by a private entity crossing over property lines and selling outside of the utility was a wheeling docket. We have no wheeling currently in the state of Hawaii. It would take some changes in the regulatory picture. Other states have wheeling, as I'm sure you're aware. California buys hydro from Oregon and what have you. But being on an island, there's no other utilities to wheel and buy from. Specifically, the state and county governments were interested in using their resources. Say we've got state land, maybe it's DLNR conservation land with a good wind regime, and we've got the state building over there. Same situation. Can we generate power for ourselves and run it through HELCO's lines, maybe pay them rent? There's no regulatory structure to allow that at this point. So it would take a change. That's all I can
So,
say.
I mean, following through on that, and in our case, it's a direct neighbor user. So obviously,
And it
it's
crosses a
direct-
property line.
crosses their property line.
You become a utility, and their tariff is very specific
So,
on that.
what would be involved? Can you give me a short version of what might be involved to further that?
Not being about one property, then you bypass that.
Yeah, if it was all one
It's not.
TNK, I know.
It's two
That's my understanding. The only other exception that I'm aware of is an ag park where you could transmit electricity to other tenants for agricultural purposes. And I need to look up the statute to make sure I got that right.
These are all industrial. They're all industrial refrigeration uses.
Understood. At the moment, there's no way legally that you can do that, and I would have to review what the previous wheeling docket looked like. You could probably, again, get that at the PUC's document management service online to see what some of the arguments were. That docket was closed without proceeding very far, so I'm not sure how helpful that will be to you. But thank you for the question, Chuck, and I know we had in the back.
Actually, my question will kind of piggyback on all of the other gentlemen's questions so far.
Okay.
In regards to what you had just said, with not being able to cross the property line to be able to distribute power, is the state then prepared, or has anything prepared, or is preparing, maybe somebody has the idea up there at the top someplace, to allow your own energy generation on your own property with your own, I don't want to say techniques, because that gets a little, I guess, it has to be a certified, some kind of system that is massively available. My idea is looking at the administration that Abercrombie's been running since 2010 and looking at him running for re-election in 2014. As far as I'm concerned, everything that's been mentioned is that his campaign, his governorship will be a less Oahu-centric campaign and administration, thus as has been so far. At the same time, looking at how, I guess, the administration could run each island, and then looking at the history of the islands and understanding the geographical implications that we have being Hawaii and how we're kind of like a circle. And to me, maybe this is just back in the day and I'm combining too many old and new stuff, but having like energy stations that don't rely on HELCO's grid might be a better solution than having one PUC or one company hold pretty much the entire energy system in sort of a monopoly, if you want to look at it that way, considering nobody else is able to distribute energy, as this gentleman stated.
They're struggling with your question here.
Sorry.
That's okay. You can all,
I will talk to Ms. Molar after, we will
you
figure
can
something
feel
out.
free to come up and make sure they got it right. I just want to say it is entirely legal and people are doing it and have been doing it for a while to generate your own power on your own property for yourself.
Oh.
Yeah. independent power systems have been doing that for decades. Those of us who are net energy metered are doing it more recently. It is the transmission of power from you to a neighbor that gets into the definition of being a public utility. That's what Chuck was asking about. You can put in whatever you want, a wind turbine on your property if you have wind, photovoltaics, your own generator, battery system for yourself. You can disconnect from the utility if that's what you would desire, and you can certainly do that.
And so yeah, I could choose whatever method of energy generation that's available, or
I
are there
don't,
stipulations on that?
it's your property. And I mean, if you wanted to put in a steam boiler and there may be some questions about safety, if you know how to run a steam boiler, but there's no limit on the technology if you've got the resource. And if you're interested in figuring out whether you do have that resource, I can maybe help you with that. We actually have a new mapping application up on our energy website. It's called Renewable Energies with GIS as the last 3 letters, where you can look up your property or any property statewide by the tax map key or by pointing at the map and get the attributes, the energy attributes and related attributes such as land zone, slope, rainfall, sunshine, wind speed, etc. So your question is, I have property here, what can I do with it with renewable energy? That application is intended to help you out. And, yeah, so you had a question.
Yeah, so my question is actually about the Puna Geothermal Venture. As you know, you have a residential district down from one of the subdivision. With PGV's intent to expand and continue expanding, what is being done to kind of allow those two entities to coexist, or can they coexist? Are they looking for a buyout scenario or anything like that? Because at this point, you have residential against industrial, which causes kind of a safety issue there if they continue to expand. I mean, it's already creating a safety issue because you have emissions coming off PGV that are, of course, we know about the SO2, or H2S, I'm sorry. And, well, radon's the single most abundant radioactive material beneath the surface, so it's expelling radon, we know that. What's being done about PGV at this point?
PGV reports its emissions, et cetera, to the Department of Health, and they are in another room. They're considered to be a compliant industry that is meeting the standards, reporting regularly, and paying the fines when they are fined.
But you are aware of the controversy that's erupted.
Absolutely.
What's being done about the controversy?
Suggestion about being done about the controversy.
Well, I'm trying to gather information at this point about what's the state's doing, because the county kind of has its ideas and they've fallen through in the past. I was just wondering.
I've been sitting in on the county's health study group and attending community meetings as necessary. Our department is not a regulatory agency. I know that DLNR's regulatory person, Eric Tanaka, is regularly at PGV making sure that the rules and the licenses that they have with DLNR are enforced. The county civil defense is in discussion with Department of Health about additional H2S monitors. I did just ask Department of Health that before this meeting because I know that Darrell Oliveira said he was going to, and I didn't know whether he had, but the Department of Health has provided the civil defense with rough cost estimates for what the monitoring would require. So that conversation is ongoing. I've offered to work with the county at whatever level would be helpful. But a number of the standards and the permits are with the county, and we provide technical input as we can and when we request it.
Okay. Thank you.
Not unaware of the controversy at all, I can assure you that. And I make sure that the items that appear in the TRIB make it into our departmental internal news clips and report on every meeting that I go to which has concerns expressed.
Okay. All right, thank you.
I have several questions. One is, I know you generate your own power,
Yeah?
but I'm not that familiar with the industry. I understand one company wanted to generate their own power, but they also wanted HELCO to stand by in case their power went down. And the cost for the standby was as much as they were already paying, so it didn't make sense at this time. Try to generate.
Do you have any more details on that? Yeah.
Does something?
I can't comment as I don't really know what the situation is.
I think it was a hotel.
It's possible. Some of the larger folk have charges that the rest of us don't pay, demand charges, for instance. And it is more expensive to pay some of those charges than say my net energy metering system, which just exchanges electrons. But without knowing a little more about it, I would hesitate to comment. But we have that. Okay, so there was a situation where a hotel wanted to go independent, but HELCO was going to charge them. The HELCO bill was not going to be reduced, even though it was going to be standby.
To the point where
Yeah.
they decided not to.
Yeah.
And another facility, I think, the sewage treatment plant, that used their biomass.
Biogas.
To generate their own energy, but they also wanted HELCO power.
I wasn't aware the sewage treatment plant had looked at that seriously, because usually they just defend it.
The story I got was one or the other. Either you go entirely on your own, or you stay with HELCO. They weren't given a choice.
You know, a lot of the big producers, a lot of the hotels have a relationship with HELCO where they actually provide backup power when HELCO has a need, or cut their use when HELCO has a need. It's very easy to turn off your waterfall pump, for instance, you know, or some of the air conditioning back in the staff areas to help balance things. So there is a two-way street, and I just can't comment on that specific item.
Another question I have is, there was a battery farm in Oahu with wind power.
Yes, there was extreme battery backup at the Kahuku wind farm. I am not sure of the cause of that fire. Again, I could walk over and ask Department of Health. There had been a spark earlier that I think was caused by electronics, not by the battery itself. But the farm is still not back online. I do want to point out that battery manufacturer also has batteries that have not malfunctioned on the Maui Kahiaha wind farm and at the Lanai Ma'ola solar array. So whether it was something specifically in the balance of systems or whether it was an actual battery failure, I don't know. Those are new generation lead acid batteries.
You know, that's the last question I have. Sorry. If you're a nonprofit, you put up a PV system, you still have to go through the interconnect study.
I think it depends on where you're located.
So they're still using a 15% rule.
It's a threshold, a guideline, and in some cases there's, depending on who else is on your grid, it could stretch a little bit. I know on Molokai it just took one commercial installation on the Kamakakai circuit to bring it up to 15% already, because it's it's that kind of circuit. But there are circuits that have well over 15%, it depends on the other customers. But for a nonprofit, the program I'd like to comment on, the governor mentioned it in his beginning comments. A law was just passed that allows for alternative financing because nonprofits can't take the tax credit generally. So there is an alternative for those who can't take the tax credit or don't have the upfront money for their energy installation as the GEMS program. And you can find a bit more information on that on the Energy Office website. I think it's right at the front page because they just had a splash announcement on it. I think we've hit everybody except for Senator Ruderman. Unless you're here to listen, but he's got...
I was just going to provide a brief answer, just a short example. One, it's kind of a mid-sized system, but the Puna Hotel has a 62-panel array that they generate on most days all of their power and feed back into the grid, and they were not charged a surcharge. They're net metered at the end of the month if they have a net positive balance, it gets written off. But that's actually a good system. It's a good functioning system, and you can walk around the right side of the building and you can see in real time what it's producing and what's produced that day and month and all. And they're happy to talk to you
Yeah,
about it.
net energy metering is a separate animal, I think, from
But it's generating your own, essentially all of their own power on that side. Without getting that, without being charged by HELCO. That was the only part I was getting to, is without being charged a standby charge.
that it may have to do with the size of the
Right.
business.
Right, that's
Because it's not whether you're a business or not a business, it's what size of business, you know. The bigger you go, the different your...
Right, and the more you pose a threat to the grid, and that you can get a large energy demand all of a sudden.
Yeah, and you're a different, you're on a different rate scale too. You could be a small grocery with a lot of refrigerators, and you could be a different rate scale from Hong Kong hotel. But net energy meters, how many people are going out, is you don't put in the battery backup, you don't. An independent power system needs to be independent, and therefore you have a backup generator usually and a battery bank. Those of us who still want the convenience of grid service have net energy meters where we trade electrons and do pay a monthly fee to stay connected, but it's not the kind of standby charge that you're talking
But you
about.
still have to go to the internet.
It depends on whether your circuit is full yet or not. But as was said, it's a major block. And Russell, you've been very patient. Do you have a question, or you just want to make?
Be patient, because I can probably bother you any day and not just today.
That's
But
true.
I have a couple questions. One's on the solar question we're talking about. I saw a survey that the other three islands have several large-scale photovoltaic systems planned, utility scale planned. Some of them private, some of them owned by the utility. All three of the other islands, but none on the Big Island, none ever yet, none on the books for planning, as far as I'm aware. I realize maybe it's because we have geothermal and HELCO feels they fulfill their renewable energy commitment. But it strikes me that we're the only island that doesn't have a wide-scale solar installation plan.
I'd be speculating, Senator. I know there have been companies interested and talking, but whether or not they turn out to be financially viable in the sunny locations, I can speculate on land values, I can speculate on construction costs, but
Well, that's have to be similar to Hawaii and Maui.
We have the cheapest land in the whole state.
it depends
Come
on
on.
where you are. Back in the 80s, the Luz company that has the SEGs, the big concentrating solar in the Mojave, came out here to see whether they could do a large solar thermal here. And I drove with them around the island, and they were very, very honest about their expectations. When you don't have real flat land that's in the Mojave, you can pretty much go out and grade it. with
Right,
a
and we're
drill.
the flattest island. We are lagging behind. What he's pointing out is that Kauai, Maui, Oahu, waypoint to your islands have large solar arrays, and we do not.
But
we
they're
have the
not on the
cheapest-
pointy part, did the.
I find that a weak excuse, but please continue.
Okay, I'm speculating because I don't know what projects may have been proposed. The project on Kauai, that's probably the largest now, is on very flat land near Port Allen. So, you know, and it's dirt rather than rock, it doesn't have to be bulldozed. I'm just speculating because there's no, hi,
5 more minutes, we can locate at UCB 100.
sure, Micah, thanks.
Wrap up, thank you.
There's no, there's no effort to discourage anyone. Our office is here to try to help get through barriers, be they permitting, be they regulatory, etc. And we've worked with a number of photovoltaic companies that have been interested in other islands. No one that I know of has progressed very far on the Big Island, and why the reason is, I don't know. I was speculating, and I may be completely wrong. But the sunny parts of the island are on the Gold Coast. We do have a lot of PV rooftop. I mean,
Well, someone just put one in Lower Puna where we don't have that much sun, and it
No.
still is economical. There was a small private
Sure.
system. But HELCO has seemed to have done nothing to encourage such a system on our island.
I don't know what's in the pipeline in the feed-in tariffs. Have you been able?
Well, I just
take a
saw
look
this
there?
list of PV installations existing and planned, and the other islands versus the Big Island was a
Mhm.
striking difference.
There is.
12 projects on Kauai, 12 on Maui, 0 on Big Island.
It's probably economics of economy of scale, because we have a fairly decent population size, but to distribute the energy they may generate could be extremely cost prohibitive unless they sign a contract with HELCO, and then HELCO is going to do it so they profit from the arrangement, so that could be taking out the profit
I think
margin, the way they analyze it.
we can expect an array up at the Natural Energy Lab. I know we've been working with the National Renewable Energy Lab on something there.
But see, once again, that implies that PV arrays on a large scale are still an experiment. And every other island has gone way past that already.
I don't take that implication at
No,
all.
okay.
I take that implication as, quite frankly, NELHA's the only entity that I know of that can sell electricity to its neighbor
I see.
by state law. And their neighbor is the airport. That's an interesting question. I'll talk to my guys who deal more with the solar, but
Can I sneak one more quick question in?
I don't see why not.
I talked to Don Thomas, and he's associated with UH, and he's doing a statewide preliminary survey of geothermal potential around the state. But HELCO is going to decide on its RFPs, on its new next geothermal plan, before that survey is even done in its preliminary phase. Isn't there something wrong with that picture? Why are we hurrying to cite the next geothermal plan before we do this survey of where it might go? I mean, the result is they're going to stick it Puna because it's the only place it's been proven. And the individual power producer doesn't want to do all the exploratory wells, which is perhaps more the states.
Well, they're probably going to.
But they're going to do it in Puna. No one's going to plug one in Saddle Road and Oahu A until that survey is finished in about a year.
I can't speak for what proposals HELCO has received or will be judging on, but I know that we're aware of the areas where there's interest, and should there be an area of interest that a private entity will be doing the exploration, as has been done on Maui, that means that Don will be able to put his resources in another area of interest that will not be having the private investment. I see it as a complementary effort. It would certainly be beneficial if we were able to focus in and say, you know, that area you guys were interested in over there, we didn't find anything. That would be a shortcut and helpful for all people concerned. It would also be helpful if we had the data surprises. And you may have talked to Don about some of the work that he
I
has
did.
done before.
I
But
also talked to President HELCO, who said because there are no surveys independent of, exploratory results, he doesn't expect any company to take any other area seriously. And I just wonder why the rush? Why the rush to do a second plant before we do the survey of where that plant might go? Why is that?
Are there a deadline
Is there-
somehow that they have?
well, it's just two parallel efforts. I don't know what went into HELCO's decision on the timing. I know that they did receive a fair amount of pressure from some of your colleagues and others interested in seeing things move forward. Don's research, it was funded again through ARA funds, and that was on a separate timeline. I would have been personally quite happy to see that work continued, from the 80s and 90s, but as a result of decisions made back then with the lawsuit saying stop the research that's continuing, a lot of the momentum was lost. It would be very nice to have the data now, and I'm really hoping that Don will get some more data. Until then, there are private companies that are willing to invest, perhaps with some federal assistance, as was done on Maui, and do some exploration. The more information we have, the better. I like state-funded exploration because we get all the information. It's not proprietary.
Yeah.
It's not proprietary.
Yeah,
And
thank you.
we
Just
probably
real
are
quick,
very close to,
we have to run, but I have HELCO's draft proposal in review from, and it's interesting, and then it contemplates the incredible private expense and investment that will have to go, that is at risk, but it also contemplates multiple installations, which was different than the original RFP, down to as small as 1 megawatt.
Several smaller plants.
Right, but it's interesting that they contemplate how expensive that private and how at risk that investment is, without really including the possibility that there is a state study that could make the timing better.
It just seems like the cart before the horse.
And they're gonna sign a long-range power purchase contract based on
That's how you
what
go.
they award to, so they're not gonna be looking for alternatives. I don't know how long the contract is supposed to run, 20 years?
I really doubt that HELCO would sign a long-term purchase power contract with someone who doesn't have data there, so I think you could expect a stepped.
They
Oh, no,
want a
I'm not questioning
20-year
the data.
purchase contract with Idaho Puna. That's all they do is long-term contracts. That's,
how they
right?
Right.
That's why we're in the spot we're in.
But
That's why he's worried. That's why there's never gonna be a geothermal plant where they actually need the power in Kona. Because they will build this plant in Puna. We're already producing well above your 40% statewide required clean energy, right? So there's really no other push except that Malama Solomon and some of the other senators at the statewide level have pushed HELCO to this. This did not come from this county. It did not come from these people. You're saying it didn't come from you. I'm sorry I'm a little irritated, but I thought we were going to hear the New Day plan for energy, and I've heard nothing about what the governor plans for this state, present or future.
if you wanted to lecture on New Day Energy, we could have done that. This was an open question session to get your comments in. And if you have submitted the comments to our YKA folks here, if those of you who asked questions would like to make sure they captured them on the paper, I know it's hard to read from where you are, so you might want to come up.
Yeah, I'm
and
gonna have to come out.
But since Micah gave us the heads up 7 minutes ago, we're probably
Thank you,
The
Andrew.
doors were locked and we can't leave now.
Oh, I don't think it's that bad.
Thank you, Kurt.